The Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Jeff Brantley.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back in the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. This for episode 85 of the show. A ton to get into today, a ton to go over all week here, and a ton of coverage coming up. As most of you, if you follow me on Twitter, have seen a big fight week ahead. UFC 262 coming up on Saturday. Sometimes when I do these recap shows on Mondays, we don't really start turning the page until later in the week. This is going to be one of those shows, though, that we start turning the page to later in the week, as UFC 262 coming up Saturday, live from Houston, Texas. And by the way, I'll be there. I'll be in the arena. Again, as many of you have seen on Twitter, at Jeff_Brantley, me tweeting out. I'll be there. I'm very excited for that. Have not been to a live fight since last February here in Houston, Texas. So a lot to go over for that event coming up later this week. That's why we will turn the page a lot on a Monday version of the show to UFC 262, but we will have plenty, of course, of recap as well today. We did come off of a busy fight weekend. I'll say busy, but it was a little bit different of a one. You know, the UFC card we had, UFC Vegas 26, had its moments, right? But not a massive card. It was a little bit of a, I want to call it a throwaway. I'm not trying to rip any athletes, any of the fighters on that card, any card ever. They're putting the bodies on the line, right? The UFC, some of those fights, you know, Marina Rodriguez, of course, beating Michelle Waterson in the main event. Actually, she's going to be in some big fights down the line here. So not a total throwaway card, but it was a little bit, okay? But we did have Canelo Alvarez once again getting another win, getting another belt under his resume, getting another belt under his belt as he continues to unify the super middleweight division of boxing. So we did have some big boxing, though, on Saturday night. Canelo Alvarez getting that win over Billy Joe Saunders. Have some thoughts on that. And then maybe the biggest mixed martial arts card of the weekend we had. Bellator 258 this past Friday. Anthony Rumble Johnson returning. You also had on that card Sergio Pettis. So some big fights on that Bellator card. Going to go over that. Going to go over a little of the PFL action we saw on Thursday. PFL in full swing now. So a lot to go over today right here on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. And all week again, a busy fight week. UFC 262 massive. That card is so stacked. One of the better ones we've seen, I don't want to say in a long time, because UFC 261 was pretty good actually too, and now that we are starting to have fans back in the building for all of these pay-per-views, from what Dana White is saying from now on, Dana White, the UFC, really doing a good job stacking these cards, and we're seeing that again later this week on UFC 262, so can't stress that enough. Keep it locked right here on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. First, the details, and I'll go into my five-minute subjects, as I always do, and finish it up with three more topics, including I am going to throw a little bit more into my five-minute topics today, as we do have some more breaking news around mixed martial arts, both in the PFL and in the UFC regarding UFC 262, so keep it right here. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Brantley. Same thing on Instagram, guys, at Jeff_Brantley. Check out the YouTube channel. Many of you now tuning into each episode on YouTube. That's great. I love it. That's why I started this YouTube channel. This is the third, fourth, fifth episode, something like that, we're doing on YouTube now. So make sure you go subscribe on YouTube, the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast YouTube channel. It's in my link tree, both on Twitter and on Instagram. I'll tweet it out again. I tweet it out with every episode. So go check it out. Hit the subscribe button. Ton of cool stuff on YouTube. All the episodes. And as many of you have seen, we've started simulating some of these fights too, some of these main events, even more so, not even just the main events, but some of the bigger fights on each of these cards. We've started to do that up on YouTube from EA Sports UFC 4, so that's pretty cool. And I add my commentary. Haven't added it to all of them, if I've ran out of time a little bit with some of them, but when I have had time, I've added my commentary to them as well. Some funny shtick, that type of stuff. So go check it out over on YouTube, the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. Also go subscribe on all the audio platforms. I know a lot of you, including myself sometimes, I'm always listening on, any of the platforms, Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get it, guys. Maybe you're in the car, driving to work, whatever it is, go check it out there as well. Go hit subscribe on all of those channels. That way you get the latest notifications for each audio episode. And that, again, also up when each episode I tweet out, I post, I'll also post that up there. Again, also on my link tree. Check that out, the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. And then the website, if you want to get links to everything, which is even simpler, just go to maninthecagemmma.show. That website has pretty much everything you need for the podcast up there. Videos, the link to the YouTube channel, link to the audio shows, We also are going to have some more stuff in the future here. I'm going to look to relaunch the blog content on the website. So a ton of stuff. An about page, why this is the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast, all that stuff. If you're new, if you're unfamiliar with me and the show, go check that out, maninthecage.mma.show. And you can get some merchandise. I'm wearing one of my t-shirts right now, if you can see this. You can get one of these t-shirts or a sweatshirt or a hoodie or what. Not a sweatshirt this time of year, especially down here in Southeast Texas. I might just melt into a big blob on the sidewalk. You can't do a sweatshirt this time of year, but although in Colorado right now, my folks, some other people, my friends out there, it's like 40 degrees still, so maybe you could get another couple weeks out of a hoodie. Whatever you want though, any of the merchandise, go check it out. Snag yourself some Man in the Cage swag up on maninthecage.mma.show. You can find all of that merchandise up on the website, so go check it out right now. All right, everybody, going to get to my 5-minute topics in 1 second here, including some breaking news for UFC 262 and that PFL event from this past Thursday. But real quick, just a story why the Man in the Cage podcast schedule was a little off, because I wanted episode 85 to come out the end of last week, previewing Bellator 258, previewing Canelo Saunders, talking about UFC Vegas 26. Obviously, that didn't happen, but there was good reason for that. Number one, I was in Colorado for a couple weeks, actually a few weeks, almost a month, visiting my mom as it was her birthday. Also, my wife's family lives in Colorado too, some of them her mom. So we were out in Colorado visiting everybody. We were on the old road trip, if you will, and we live down here in Southeast Texas, and we drive to Colorado, then we had to drive back. So we had a long road trip, and for those that have driven through Texas, if you're from Texas, even if you've ever just driven through Texas, you know this. And if you haven't, I don't think you want to find out what I'm about to say here. But Texas, you look at it on a map, right? And you're like, that's a pretty big state. And you can look at any numbers and you're like, that's a big state. You truly don't know how big it is until you're driving through Texas. We call it a state. I think we should call it a continent. I think we should start calling it the continent of Texas. It's so massive. It takes so long. I mean, literally, it's shorter from Denver to Amarillo, Texas, than it is from Amarillo, Texas, down near Houston, where we live. It's literally 8.5 hours from Amarillo, Texas, to Houston, Texas. And then it's about 5 or 6 hours from Denver to Amarillo, Texas. So never do it. If you do wherever, and this isn't just the drive we make. If you're driving from San Antonio, Austin, anywhere, El Paso, any of that stuff out in West Texas, it's all long. It takes a long time. So it took us forever to get back home, and then we had to move. Now this is our own doing a little bit, okay? We wanted to move to a new apartment. We had it all set up. Our trip went a little longer than we thought it would, but we had to pack all of our packing into just about a day or so. Literally a day. We had to pack everything, get it all going, and as you can see, that's the second reason why things were a little off schedule and why I'm in a different room right now, and why you can see one of my favorite posters, my Rocky poster behind me here, and also you can see my wife's and I's shoe bookshelf back, but not a bookshelf, a shoe shelf behind me here in the room, as this room's a little disheveled. But that's the reason why, because we were also moving apartments. We had to do that in about a day, and that took a little bit longer too, since our trip took a little bit longer. So that's why our schedule was thrown off. That's why all of that happened. And hopefully now we can get it going. I will get it going back on schedule with the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast. And by the way, too, I moved near Houston, Texas, but I'm not in that neighborhood where that tiger was. Did everyone see that out there? That was crazy. The tiger loose in that Houston neighborhood. You have neighbors out. You got he's a police officer, an off-duty police officer with a gun out pointed towards the tiger. I would be scared to death if I saw a tiger. If I was that cop, I would have been a little more itchy on that tiger. I don't know. That's scary, that tiger. I would not be doing that. But I don't live there. I didn't move to that neighborhood though. We're not on the same block as that tiger's loose, and hopefully it never comes to our neighborhood. Otherwise, I'll be running. I'll be probably peeing my pants. Probably that would be not a very good event. Probably my dog too. My dog's the worst guard dog in the world. So, but we're not near the tiger there. But we just moved. That's why the schedule's off. But we're back on track here now on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast. All right, with that, let's get into it now. Again, I'm going to start my timer, get into my 5-minute topics, go through everything today, and I've thrown I was going to go number one on the list. I was going to talk about Bellator 258, recapping that event. But I've decided to go a little different with topic number one today, as we have had a bunch of breaking news. And I'll start with the PFL news, and then I'll move to 262 as well, with a fight being off on that card. Now, we also have another big fight that was called off last week, I'll kind of group that in. But a big fight today off that UFC 262 main card. But we'll start out in the PFL as I start my clock here. And as most of you, if you saw that PFL event from this past Thursday, one of the more notable names that PFL has signed in the offseason, Fabricio Verdum, of course. He was making his debut in there against Hernan Ferreira, of course. Verdum, for those that saw that fight, many of you have, Verdum taps Ferreira in that fight. He taps him. He gets him in a triangle. He's tapping him. You can see the shoulder tap. Ref doesn't see it. Ferreira gets out and then ends up knocking out Fabricio Verdum. Well, according to many reports today, Errol Hawani, all these guys out here, and just going straight from my phone here, many of these guys tweeting out about it, that loss has been overturned for Verdum now. It's been turned to a no contest. I think that's a great move. That's obviously the right move for the commission, for those PFL standings. For Fabricio Verdum, listen, did he get knocked out? Yes. Should you be able to regroup? Yes. But at the same time, as many athletes know, as many fighters know, when you're about to win, because essentially Fabricio Verdum won the fight, right? He gets the tap with the triangle. He gets the submission. Fight's over. I mean, mentality-wise, you're cooked at that point. You're not going to be able to rebound from that. You get the tap. You see the ref not see it. You're panicking a little bit, right? Not panicking, but you know what I mean. You're probably thinking, what the heck, man? Like, I just had to win. Oh, no. Maybe Verdum, I know he's fought in the UFC. I know he's a veteran, but, still a new promotion. Maybe he's got a little bit of a butterflies going into that fight. He's probably maybe, I don't want to say gassing himself out, but you know what I mean? Amped himself up a little too much. Maybe he start to, come down off that a little bit. There can be a big letdown there. So that was good by the commission to get that no contest, get that win for Ferreira overturned to a no contest. I think that's only fair for Verdum. You don't see it much, but I think that's why in this case, that it makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's many people out there who would argue that shouldn't have not been a no contest between Verdum and Ferreira in that fight. So that was a good call by the PFL there. Or by the commission to overturn that decision to that no contest. And then next up here, the next piece of breaking news and why we've changed this up. The PFL news there. Minor. This one even more so going towards this week. Another fight off of UFC 262. We already lost the Nate Diaz-Leon Edwards fight in the co-main event. So mad, of course, for that one. Is that one going to get pushed back? Nate Diaz, minor injury. We saw that last week. All right, well then today we lose another main card fight. Edmund Shabazian and Jack Hermansson, that fight off of 262 now. It's going to be pushed back just a week though, which is good. Well, for those that were looking forward to 262, including myself being in the building, not good. But for fight fans in general, which I'm of course a fight fan first, I'm not just going to be selfish and want all the fights, live. Just as a fight fan, it is good that it's only pushed back a week. But nonetheless, Jack Hermansson and Edmund Shabazian, that going to be pushed back a week due to someone in Hermansson's camp. Some guys out there, a bunch of media reports now saying that it's because someone in his camp had a positive COVID test. So we lose another 262 fight, and we get a PFL ruling overturned. Again, I agree with the PFL ruling there. I agree with the commission ruling there to overturn that to a no contest. And then for the 262 non-fight here, pull out by Shabazian and Hermansson, just a bummer. I mean, just another big fight that could have been on this card. Trust me, it's still stacked. I mean, that's how crazy this card is. And that's what I'm going to get into later on in the show. Again, next up, I'm going to start kind of recapping what we saw over the weekend here and then get back to 262 at the end of the show here. But that's just how stacked UFC 262 is, literally. That we've lost Nate Diaz and Leon Edwards, and we've lost now Shabazian versus Hermansson on the main card, and this card is still amazing, and they can still fill it. I mean, the featured bout of the night, feature prelim, if you will, Jacare Souza taking on Muniz. That fight now can be probably shifted to the main card. So, the UFC, they might have to add a fight here, and I think that's all that's been. I think there might have been one or two as well that we've lost a fighter here or there, or a fighter. Actually, I think we just lost a substitution, if I remember correctly here. Again, I was running around, moving in on the road the last week or so here. But definitely the Shabazian Hermansson fight, a bummer that we don't get that. But this card's so stacked, as I said, Jacare Souza, Muniz. They're just going to switch probably that fight onto the main card, and then we'll hopefully find something else here. I mean, there's guys like there's a bunch of guys that want to fight on this card. I think they should be able to find a replacement fight to keep this card stacked. But nonetheless, a bummer. Some breaking news today there for UFC 262, and again, the PFL. And this is where you want to come every show, right here on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast, for all that breaking news. And I'm usually tweeting stuff out live, instant reaction. Again, follow me on Twitter for all of that stuff, because I'm sure we're going to have some, as we near our 5 minutes here, we're going to have plenty more news coming out this week going into 262. We might even, I don't know if I had any wood around me. I guess this is real wood. Hopefully we don't, knock on wood, have any more huge cancellations of any fights going into 262. But if they happen, I'll break them down right here on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. All right, next up, topic number 2 here. I'm going to set 5 more minutes on the clock here. Bellator 258. As I said, we're going to get into that now from this past Friday. And it was the best card of the weekend again here. Now, is it going to be like that every single week for Bellator? No. And I think some out there, especially the Bellator haters, they're real. They're really real, because I see them all, and some of them, I love talking with you actually on Twitter because you're very passionate. And they're obviously MMA fans. I love talking to mixed martial arts fans in general. But there is a group, there's a population of Twitter and social media in general that hates the fact that there is the thought that there's Bellator cards that are actually better than an UFC card. Of course there is. Just like there are some fantastic One Championship cards, just like there are some fantastic Cage Warriors cards, right? There's some great cards out there. Well, Bellator had a good one, a very good one from this past Friday that really was the best mixed martial arts card of the week. Now, that PFL card, again, do you enjoy it? Fabricio Verdum again on that card. You have the controversy. Where there's some, other good fights, of course. But that Bellator card, so stacked, especially the top 2 fights. And that's mostly the ones I'm going to talk about today. You have Sergio Pettis getting the bantamweight title, beating Juan Archuleta by unanimous decision in the main event of that one. And then you have Anthony Rumble Johnson coming back for the first time since 2017, scoring a knockout in that one over Augusta in the Bellator light heavyweight tournament there to move on to the next round. So a couple big noteworthy things there, and we'll start out with that main event with Sergio Pettis beating Juan Archuleta. Archuleta, a good fighter, of course, very good fighter, very solid fighter, but Sergio Pettis showed why the last few fights here since he's moved to Bellator, why he made the right move. Okay, Sergio Pettis has always had some skill, just like Anthony Pettis has. Now, I would argue that Anthony Pettis actually, compared to his brother, they're kind of done one of these now, where Anthony Pettis he's already had the peak of his career. He's hit his limelight. He's really dropped down, right? Anthony Pettis has had a hard time, especially at the end of his UFC career there. I know he was fighting a lot of killers. He's fighting Tony Ferguson when Tony Ferguson was on his streak, all that. But Anthony Pettis has come down a little bit. Sergio Pettis, though, he stayed pretty steady, and he's surpassed his brother a little bit now. Now, again, that's not the measuring stick here, but just trying to make the point that Sergio Pettis has become a very solid fighter now. He's become a very solid fighter, and he's made the right move to Bellator. There are some guys who should take the step, and this is not a rip on Bellator, because again, I think Bellator's adding fantastic talent. I think they're adding that talent. I think they're getting better. The talent pool, the competition there is getting higher and higher and higher. But there are some guys who should take that step from Bellator to the UFC. We're seeing that with Michael Chandler, and we're going to see more so of that measuring stick coming up on Saturday at 262 when he takes on Charles Oliveira for the UFC lightweight title. We're definitely going to see that competition there. He's had one fight in the UFC. He's got one first-round finish, an early knockout. So Chandler was one of those guys where he should have taken that next step. He wanted to take that next step, and I watched the UFC Countdown episode today for 262, and Chandler talks about that. And I'll get into more of that later here on episode 85, but Chandler is one of those guys that should have taken that next step. Well, there's some guys like Sergio Pettis where in the UFC's bantamweight division, he was falling just a little bit short. And again, I'm not just saying it's not just, taking the competitive level down a little bit or taking the competition level down a little bit, because, again, Juan Archuleta is a solid fighter in Bellator. Sergio Pettis is still fighting some solid fighters, but I think just being a little bit more consistent and then also taking just that slight little, dip in competitiveness as far as the division goes. Sergio Pettis, we've seen the wonders that he's been able to do in Bellator so far. So good for him. He goes to Bellator, he gets paid, and he gets the contract now. Now he beat Juan Archuleta. He's got the contract. He's got the belt now, rather the bantamweight title. So good for Sergio Pettis. Now, I'm running out of time here. I spent too much time talking about that title fight, but real quick here. The co-main event, Anthony Rumble Johnson, he returns against Augusta. He's having some trouble early. Of course, he was supposed to face Yoel Romero. Speaking of fights that didn't happen, Yoel Romero was supposed to fight him. Yoel Romero has some medical issues. His Bellator debut put on hold. It's just a bummer there. Another bummer, another jinxed fight there. But he still gets a somewhat decent opponent, of course, in Augusto in that fight, does Anthony Rumble Johnson. He comes out, he scores the knockout. He did have some moments where he was hurt, where it might look like there was an upset brewing for Augusto. But to be honest with you, that's how I expected that fight to go for Anthony Rumble Johnson. We saw the rustiness, right? I mean, if it's just bound to happen. If you haven't fought since 2017 in a pro, boxing ring, I don't care. I mean, the thing was, given Conor McGregor, even though he was away from the octagon for a little bit, he fought Floyd Mayweather, right? In boxing, MMA, different. You can argue that, I know. But he was still in a boxing ring. He was still in a big setting, a competitive setting for at least one fight. Anthony Rumble Johnson, I know he did some grappling tournaments here and there, but nothing massive though, nothing on the scale of stepping back into the cage like that and facing somebody that's trying to knock your head off like that. So you expected some of that rustiness, and you saw a little bit of that. But once he got it back, we saw the old Anthony Rumble Johnson power there. He knocks out Augusto, as Bellator probably wanted. Now, Yoel Romero, that would have been a different story. I think they wouldn't have cared as much. But now, when Romero was pulled out of that fight, Bellator really wanted Rumble Johnson to win that fight. And most fans did too, because now he moves on to the next round as part of the Bellator light heavyweight tournament, and we get him versus Vadim Nemkov, which, for my money, again, and I've said it many times on the show, I know I'm running a little over, but I'm going to go to my next topic here, recap UFC Vegas 26 in a little bit, and also Canelo Saunders. For my money, Vadim Nemkov is the best light heavyweight in the world right now. I think Glover Teixeira could make an argument for that. I love Glover Teixeira's game right now. Jan Blachowicz certainly still very good. I'm not taking anything away from Jan. I'm not taking anything away from those guys, but I think Vadim Nemkov could compete with all those guys. I think he is that good, and I think he's going to continue to show that, and I think he's going to get, honestly, a highlight reel moment against Anthony Rumble Johnson. The power is always going to be there, and again, I don't want to go into this too much. I'll go into this later on when they face each other on that preview show down the line when those guys face each other later this year. But this is going to be a big-time moment for Vadim Nemkov, where the power for Rumble could definitely stop the show, but if Rumble comes out like he did in this fight, looking a little sketchy, Vadim Nemkov could turn the lights out too, and that's why this is going to be an interesting fight, actually, between Nemkov and Anthony Rumble Johnson, and really prove or disprove my theory that he's one of the best in the world. We'll see what happens in that fight. It's going to be very, very good. But Bellator 258, a bunch of other fights on that card. Again, I could go on for days how good that Bellator 258 card was, but we got to move along here to topic number 3 on the Man of the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast. All right, topic number 3 here as I reset the clock again, 5 minutes on this one, and this going to the boxing world, actually. So maybe I should do a 3-minute round here for the 3-minute rounds in boxing, but I'll still do 5 minutes for it because I love Canelo Alvarez. I love talking about Canelo Alvarez, and honestly, this was going to be my number one topic until we had all the breaking news happen. Well, not my number one topic. It was going to be after Bellator 258, but it was going to be right up there as the thing I talked about on the show because Canelo Alvarez adds another belt to his resume. He beats Billy Joe Saunders this time, stops him late in the fight. Saunders unable to get off of his stool. Corner stops the fight. First off, let me address this before I get to Canelo, his greatness, what's next for him, all that good stuff. But there was a lot of going around on Saturday night that Saunders quit in the fight, that Saunders had talked a bunch of trash, which he did. You had the ring size controversy last week, which was ridiculous. And if you think that's all Saunders, I could be wrong on this, but I don't think it was all Saunders. I think a little bit of it was drummed up. I think you got to drop a lot of that. But nonetheless, it was still there. So I know a lot of people, when they see Saunders not get off of his stool in the 8th and 9th round, there's a lot of vitriol towards him. And I know this is where the betting community and the boxing betting community, the combat betting, sports betting community also plays a role in the what's being thought of a fighter in a fight. Because a lot of, I think a lot of people bet the over 10.5 in that fight, and I think a lot of people bet Canelo by decision. So a lot of people are mad when Saunders doesn't get off the stool when the fight stopped early because his corner throws in the towel. But we find out later here, he's got a broken orbital bone. He's got some issues, of course, structurally in his face there. So that was a good call by his corner. That was a good stoppage. Canelo was taking it to him. Again, Canelo just continues, and this is why I don't want to debate this anymore. I saw it going into this week. Even Tyson Fury's out there, and I know, he's a British fighter. He's trying to stick up for other British fighters. They're trying to create some pub around it. You want to stick up for your guy. But going into this week, we're hearing how Saunders is such a pure boxer, and he could give Canelo problems with his footwork, and that's why the ring size matters. And is this going to be the time Canelo? Is this going to be the time that he loses a fight? give me a break. Let's get past this now. Is Canelo unbeatable? No. No one, maybe Floyd Mayweather in his prime, maybe some fighters we've seen in mixed martial arts throughout the years, maybe they're close to unbeatable, but no one's truly unbeatable. But Canelo is close to those guys right now, and he's on that Floyd level now. I don't care who Canelo faces next. Well, I shouldn't say who he faces. Again, I think there's some guys out there who could challenge him, make things somewhat interesting. I mean, the Gennady Golovkin fight, the 2 fights they had, a lot of controversy around those against Canelo. So again, is there guys out there that can challenge him, make things interesting? Yes, but there's not many of them. I mean, Triple G in his prime, that's Triple G. I mean, Triple G at one point, you could argue he was up there with the status, obviously, of a Canelo Alvarez as far as pound-for-pound power guy in the world, that he was knocking everybody out and was super impressive. So I don't want to hear it anymore, though, of, this whole last week, Saunders is going to... No, we saw it. He put on another masterclass to Canelo. He showed off why he's so brilliant and why he is the pound-for-pound best in the world right now in boxing, and there's no debating it. There's absolutely no debating it. I know there's always arguments for the heavyweights, Tyson Fury, maybe if he goes out there, beats an Anthony Joshua after beating Deontay Wilder the way he did, maybe there's some argument there for the heavyweight. But right now, Canelo Alvarez is the pound-for-pound best in the world, no doubt about it. Hands down, it's got to be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now. He's so brilliant. He sets up his punches so good. He has so much power. He uses that jab. His defense, the way he turns his head with every shot that you're going to even throw in, he's going to actually eat. I mean, just everything that Canelo Alvarez does, even some of his footwork, right? His body work, so super impressive. Canelo Alvarez is an old school fighter fighting in a new school era here. To simply put it, Canelo Alvarez, like others, many before him, many Mexican boxers, he is that brilliant. He is that great, and we just need to enjoy it a little bit. And again, I don't want to be bothered on some of these fight weeks. If you throw somebody in front of him that can put a little bit of a test up, I'll talk about it right here on the Man of the Cage podcast. But even then, I think he's at that highest step now where even those guys who you think can challenge him are a slight step below him. That's how brilliant Canelo Alvarez is right now. We saw that again this past Saturday night against Saunders, where Saunders was holding his own a little bit, but Canelo just made him eat too many shots. Literally broke his face. I mean, he literally broke his face to Canelo Alvarez. So I don't want to hear any of that anymore. Let's next fight week for Canelo, it's going to be, does he stop the guy or not? That's the only question I want to hear. Is he going to knock him out in 6 rounds, or is he going to knock him out in under 10? That's the only thing I want to hear with Canelo Alvarez moving forward. And now he can go try to unify all the titles, of course, against Plant later this summer here. I would love to see that. I would love to see him unify all those super middleweight titles, get all of them, and they should be there. And that's why the UFC, that's why these mixed martial arts organizations have the best belt system you can have right now. I know that one championship has, lightweight titles. I know Bellator has a lightweight title. I know the UFC has a lightweight title. So I know there's not only one lightweight title in the world, but I mean, the UFC lightweight title, if you're the lightweight champion in the UFC, you're the best in the world, right? I think it's just kind of how it goes. So that's why mixed martial arts, the one belt system they've had, one belt system in each promotion they've had, works better than these 5 or 6, 7, how many made-up belts boxing's going to have? I mean, they have like a Ring Magazine belt. Nothing against Ring Magazine, but it's getting too absurd. Canelo should be the unified super middleweight champion of the world, though. He's pound-for-pound best. He needs to be the super middleweight champion of the world in every single belt, and I think he's going to accomplish that later this summer. We'll see. Again, another one of those fights where we're playing that it could be an interesting one. It could be a little bit tougher for him, but I think Canelo at the end of the day, just no one, I don't think you're going to have your best day, and Canelo's going to have somewhat of an off day, I think, in order to beat him right now. But that's just me. But that was the fight from this past Saturday night. Canelo Alvarez beating Billy Joe Saunders, getting some more belts underneath his belt there, and continuing to unify that boxing super middleweight division. So that was topic number 3 there. Now we're going to move on to topic number 4. And then I'm going to flip the page. We're going to really start moving towards UFC 262, put this past fight weekend behind us, as, again, it's a stacked weekend. I'm so pumped, so fired up for UFC 262. But putting 5 more minutes on the clock now, we're going to talk about that last PFL event from this past Thursday. Again, talked about it a little bit already. Fabricio Verdum and Renan Ferreira there. That fight getting ruled a no contest now after Verdum tapped Ferreira, and then the ref doesn't see it. Then Ferreira knocks out Fabricio Verdum. That ruled a no contest now. A good call there there from this past Thursday. But I want to talk about the PFL in general a little bit too. We can go fight by fight. We could talk about it. I mean, Kayla Harrison, she gets another easy win. I mean, how easy is it for Kayla Harrison right now? She's in the wrong, I don't want to say wrong promotion, because she's getting easy paydays. She's not taking any too much damage right now. She's going to get even bigger paydays at the end of her career if she wants to move to Bellator or the UFC to either face Amanda Nunes or I guess Chris Cyborg. So there's a lot of money to be made, and Kayla Harrison still might get tested against some of those women, which are her only competition. I mean, the only people in the world that can even have a chance against Kayla Harrison are Amanda Nunes and Chris Cyborg. Maybe I'm missing some people out there, but for my money, again, that's where it's at. That there's only 2 women in the world that can really challenge Kayla Harrison right now. But she gets another easy win. So, we could go fight by fight. We could talk about Clay Collard beating Anthony Pettis, a great upset, one that I thought would happen. I thought Clay Collard would beat Anthony Pettis in Anthony Pettis' debut in the first PFL event of the season there. We can go fight by fight there, but really just want to talk about it in general, because I think what the PFL is doing right now is having the type of season, having the type of year they really needed. They absolutely needed it more than any other mixed martial arts promotion out there. And of course, there's some smaller MMA promotions. There's some smaller mom and pop MMA promotions that, because of the pandemic, weren't fighting. Do they need to get back? Do they need to have a big year? Yes. But I'm talking about major promotions here. The PFL kind of seemed like they were at a crossroads. It's a great idea. It's a fun concept. People love it. But because of the pandemic, because of not being able to fight last year, not have any cards, again, I mean, Bellator, the UFC, they came back, they put on cards all the way from May all the way to December again. Shoved their whole schedule into it. Bellator, they were able to come back late in the year still. PFL had no shows because of the season format. They didn't have any fights. They lost a lot of movement. They lost a lot of traction. And they had fighters like Kayla Harrison who really were itching to go fight, needed to be paid, wanted to go get paid, who weren't being allowed to at one point. And it became a huge PR nightmare for them. So the PFL, they weren't making money. They had some PR nightmares going on. They're losing that audience, right? Because they weren't on last year. They needed to have a big year. And I feel like this is the season, this is the year that they needed to have so far. Was the Verdum fight against Vera, was that great? No, it wasn't. But in general, it's going pretty good. Rory McDonald, he makes his debut in PFL. He gets a win. Great. Even the Clay Collard Anthony Pettis fight, that's still great for ratings. He still gets the win. It's a standings format. Anthony Pettis, he's still going to have his moments in the PFL. And it just creates that for Clay Collard after the great year he had in boxing. He went over there, of course, to Top Rank, was beating a lot of top boxing prospects, having a lot of success. So Clay Collard, that's a great story. Anthony Pettis is still going to get some wins. Fabricio Verdum, it's a no contest here. He should have got a win. I still think he's going to get a bunch of wins. Rory McDonald, Kayla Harrison, and then ones we haven't even talked about yet, which I'm so excited about later this year to see how it goes. And speaking of Kayla Harrison competing, speaking of Amanda Nunes in the bantamweight division, in the women's featherweight division in mixed martial arts, Claressa Shields, the talented boxer, she's making her MMA debut later this summer, June 10th, I believe, on that PFL card. So, Claressa Shields is going to be part of this PFL promotion. We have Kayla Harrison. We have a bunch of more stars now, some more recognizable names that were from the UFC. This is the kind of year, and fun fights again. Fun, exciting fights, fun season format. This is exactly what we wanted to see, what we needed to see from the PFL to have a fantastic 2021. Turn the page on a bad year and get to all the good stuff here, which the PFL has mostly been most of the time, and even more so now. Again, years past, we haven't had Anthony Pettis there. We haven't had Fabricio Verdum. We haven't had Rory McDonald. Not ripping any of the other fighters, and there's some names, and we've seen some names from the PFL go to the UFC, to Bellator. It's not that it doesn't happen, but we haven't seen the household names in the PFL, and we're seeing that this year, and good fights, and some good moments. So this is what the PFL needed. This has been a fantastic year for them. Even the controversy itself, how's the saying go? No publicity is bad publicity. Same thing here for the PFL, and they get ready to do a no contest with the Fabricio Verdum. So, a great start to the season for the PFL. I can't wait to see how the rest of the season goes here, and many more fantastic moments. And that first event of the year, we have a plus 300 underdog cashing with Clay Collard or more. We have another plus 300. So a bunch of underdog spots. It's a fun promotion. It's a lot of fun fights, a lot of competitive fights. So you have to love what you've seen from the PFL so far this year, and can't wait to see that and break it down more here, as I said, more so so in the future right here on the Man of the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. All right, that's 5 minutes on that one. One more subject, and then I'll get to my 3 topics to get us out of here. And then I'll start even more turning the page to later this week and some cool things coming up I have to talk to you about with next episode 86, and even maybe an episode 87 coming later this week for UFC 262 on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. But we're going to start to turn that page right now with topic number 5 here. And that's going to be talking about the UFC Countdown episode. So I watched that today as I get ready for UFC 262. I took some notes, and some notable things came out of that UFC Countdown episode. And of course, for those that watch it, for those that like it, it's good to amp you up. It's good to pump you up, as you see the main event fighters. You see the co-main event fighters. You see all of that. You see some of the other, they'll even sometimes go into some of the other matchups. UFC 261, they went into all 3 title fights, that type of thing. So Countdown show's always fun, and you always get some little bit of nuggets. And I got a lot of good things when I watched today. I took a lot away from this Countdown episode, and I tweeted this out again, at Jeff_Brantley, that you can't, fight week, a lot of fight week talk you have to take with a grain of salt. And that includes these videos. I know a lot of these videos are recorded ahead of time, but they're not recorded too far out. They're still recorded soon, they're recorded somewhat soon to the event. You have to take some of this with a grain of salt, but you can definitely take away some good nuggets from that UFC Countdown episode. And we'll start with the main event, of just both guys talking and things you take away. And Michael Chandler really stood out to me. And I'm a big Michael Chandler guy, and I love Charles Oliveira too as well. And he has some good stuff here. And just looking at my notes here, though, Michael Chandler's just... he's so intense, but it's a refreshing intense, though. There are guys, there are fighters, there's athletes, there's women, any person in this world where you'll meet an intense person, right? And it's just too much. It seems corny. It rubs you the wrong way. Now, I know Chandler will rub some people the wrong way, but at least myself, and I think some out there, Chandler's intense, but it's different. It's a little refreshing, though. It's not a fake intensity. He's not a fake guy, and that's why too, you see his family and how much of a family guy he is. It's so cool because being around the NFL like I have been throughout my radio career, the 9 years again that I was in radio, covering the NFL, being around NFL athletes, and this is not even just, I'm not saying people I worked with. Most people I ever worked with were super, super nice, super truthful, not fake guys at all. But you'd be in the locker room, right? In an NFL locker room. And there's guys out there, I'm not going to name them, I don't want to do that are just phony. The personality they put on camera, what they do on a podcast or a commercial, whatever it is, it's phony. Michael Chandler, again, I don't know the guy. Maybe I could be off. Maybe my radar's off on this one. He doesn't seem phony to me, though. He actually does seem like a family guy. He actually does seem like this intensity, without being too much of a jerk, is all natural to him. So I don't think he's fake like that. I do think he's all natural, is Michael Chandler. Now, the biggest thing I took away from him, from his comments, and again, there's a lot of them. As I said, looking at his fantastic camp, which is also, he has some similarities with Oliveira like that. His fantastic camp that he trains around down in Florida with Henry Hooft, one of my favorite striking coaches. He's got some similarities there. But the one comment he made on the UFC Countdown episode that I absolutely loved is that he was talking about the what-ifs scenarios that he was running through his head when he was in Bellator of, what if I retire at the age of 40 or plus in Bellator, and I never challenged myself in the UFC. How am I going to take that in retirement? As a man, as a competitor, as a fighter, how am I going to live with that? I don't know how I'm going to go down like that. So he kept playing the what if, what if. That's big to me. That just shows you the competitive spirit again of Chandler, that he's willing to go fail. And that's all. That's a lot of what obviously life is and what being a fighter is, that Chandler's willing to go in there and say, what if I don't have the chance to compete? I'd rather go take the what if chance and go compete and lose badly than to never have done it. And that just tells you all you need to know about Michael Chandler. And he made that comment, and I love that. And he's talking about saying yes all the time to every fight on the Countdown episode, which he's done. He was a backup for the Gaethje Khabib fight, as they talk about on there. Always saying yes, always intense but refreshing, as I said there. So that was my takeaway with him. For Charles Oliveira, again, some similarities actually with Michael Chandler. I wouldn't say he's as intense as Chandler is, but he's brimming with confidence. Even more, just as much as Chandler is, though, is Charles Oliveira. You hear him talk, and he's really brimming with confidence, talking about his jiu-jitsu, talking about his striking, talking about the shoot box team. He has that, not an arrogance, but a certain confidence about him that just knows, a silent confidence that he knows when he shows up to the arena on Saturday. he's one of the best in the world, and he's going to go in there and he's either going to, knock you out, tap you, or maybe get knocked out or tap you or get tapped himself, but that's not even in his head. You know what I mean? He's out there to go compete. He's not afraid. He's got that confidence. So you see that from Charles Oliveira, which was fun. In that one, and you see the similarities. I took that away from this, as I just mentioned a few times already as well, that both these guys have a lot of similarities, and I'm actually going to go over the 5 minutes here as I have a few more points I really want to make about that UFC 262 Countdown show. But, both these guys are pretty similar as they have good teams behind them. You have the shootbox team down in Palau, Brazil for Charles Oliveira, and then you have the Stanford MMA team down there in South Florida with Henry Hooft and those guys and others, right, that he trains with that are both just really good teams. So both guys coming in, great camps, great coaches, some of the top guys in the world they can train with. Very even there, some similarities. Again, Chandler's got an intensity to him. Oliveira's got just an absolute brimming with confidence to him that kind of makes them the same as far as confidence and going into a fight, not doubting themselves ever type of mentality. So some similarities there between those guys, between Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. Can't wait for that one for the lightweight title coming up on Saturday down in Houston, Texas on UFC 262. And last point on Charles Oliveira before I move to the co-main event, as I have some Dariush and Tony Ferguson takeaways. Charles Oliveira, and I already tweeted out the photo a little bit at Jeff_Brantley on Twitter. Charles Oliveira riding a chariot, I guess you would call it. I mean, I'm not a horse guy. Sorry for horse riders out there. I would call it a chariot. You see that in the Countdown episode. He's racing horses or he's racing somebody else. It's just part of a fun exercise he does in a chariot, which is pretty intense, going really fast on a horse chariot. That was pretty cool to see it. And he talked about how he does that to try to get rid of the fear behind a fight, that if you can get on a horse like that and ride like that the intent, the fear in the octagon when you step in there and you're going to go fight another man kind of disappears a little bit. So that was cool to see that as well on UFC, the UFC 262 Countdown show for Charles Oliveira. And I'm gonna keep tweeting that photo out there. I might make some memes out of it. I like that one. I've already had some fun with it today, and I'm gonna keep having fun with that one. Charles Oliveira riding a chariot on UFC 262. I wish I could ride a chariot. Maybe I'll ditch my car and just get a horse and a chariot. That's what I need to do to ride around Southeast Texas down here. I'm sure it'd be very popular in Texas. I might get run off the road. I'd probably actually die if I rode anyone that's, again, driving in Texas, anyone that's driven it, I might die actually if I rode a chariot horse down on the highways down here. People are crazy. But those are my takeaways from Oliveira and Michael Chandler. Real quick before I move to my other three topics to get us out of here, though, the takeaways from Dariush and Tony Ferguson. Dariush has just been El Dariush. I don't think there's really much to take away from him. He's kind of a quiet Tony Ferguson's more of an out. I think that's why this is actually another great fight, matchmaking-wise, that both these guys have some craziness to them, right? Especially their chaotic style of fighting. Both these guys have that a little bit. But Dariush is more of a quiet, inverted craziness, right? Like, he's just like, hey, I'm going to go out there, like the Jakar close fight. I'm just going to go out there. I'm gonna let it all hang on the line. I'm gonna try to knock you out. Whatever. I'm gonna let it fly. You think you're crazy. I'm crazier. That's just kind of Dariush's style. Like, whatever. I'm not gonna say too many weird things. I'm just gonna say, listen, I'm gonna go down there in the phone booth with you and slug it out with you, and I'm really gonna go do it. That's Dariush. Then you have Tony Ferguson, of course, who's got all the kind of the weirdness, kind of the quirks to his, his personality, all that stuff. So he's more of an outwardly crazy person, if you will. And that's kind of that's on the surface what you see there. But again, not much do you take away from Dariush, other than that he basically said the same thing that I've been saying all along here with Tony Ferguson, is that, and maybe I'll get into this a little bit more in a second here, and especially later on this week on the preview show, going to get really heavy into this, but Tony Ferguson's got to watch out in this fight. Dariush, he's got a little bit of that touch craziness, chaotic style to him too, where, it's not just Justin Gaethje can go out there and mess you up. It's not just Charles Oliveira, of course, that can go out there and mess Tony Ferguson up. Dariush, if he brings it in this fight, and Tony Ferguson brings a lot of the same things we've seen over the last couple fights where he's been down a little bit, could be a short night for Tony Ferguson, or a long night, depending on how you look at it, even if it does go 3 rounds. Could be an easy night for Beneil Dariush if Tony Ferguson doesn't bring it. Dariush is nasty on the ground. He's got nasty jiu-jitsu. He's got, obviously, that Muay Thai background in the striking, and he'll put his feet in the ground, he'll plant, and he'll throw with you, which will lead to an exciting fight, which is good for Tony's sake, though, too, now that Tony going into this fight, some of the camp changes he's made, going to Wildcard Boxing Gym, doing some of these different things, kind of working on that striking, working on that boxing, Hopefully that helps him coming into this fight, where he's going to have just as an equal of a chance to knock out or stop Beneil Dariush or win by decision as Dariush does, and that's good for Tony Ferguson. But I did take away one really, and I think actually this was the most notable quote from the whole UFC 262 countdown piece, and I probably should have just led with it, but I want to save it for last year with Tony Ferguson. But he's talking about the Charles Oliveira fight. And of course, that was a short notice fight for Charles Oliveira and Tony Ferguson. They switched opponents there. It was a little bit different, right? But still, Tony Ferguson said he had only trained 5 hours of jiu-jitsu going into that fight. And I almost spit my drink out when I heard that. I'm like, whoa, like you went into a fight with Charles Oliveira, and maybe Tony's just being Tony. Maybe he's, I don't want to say making excuses, but mentality-wise, maybe he's saying some things that make him feel better about it or make, his opponent think, oh, well, maybe he just wasn't prepared going into that fight. Maybe that's what Tony Ferguson's doing. But when I heard that, I only trained 5 hours of jiu-jitsu going into that fight against Charles Oliveira. My head almost exploded. I'm like, why wonder you lost that bad? I mean, that's just, and again, I know different opponent, things happen, he wasn't preparing for it. But it does make me wonder a little bit, though, about still, and that's why I think this wildcard boxing gym could be a little bit of I think it could be a little bit of a fake change here for Tony Ferguson, or it could be a real change for him. You know what I mean? Where maybe Tony Ferguson's saying that, and maybe what we're seeing here, maybe we're all going to think, not all going to think, but maybe we think we're going to see some improvements from Tony Ferguson, and then maybe he goes into this fight and doesn't have those improvements. Maybe he actually does go out there and we say, oh, well, it was all a fake enthusiasm by everybody. It was all fake by, it was all just a distraction by Tony to make himself look better, that he actually didn't pick anything up at Wildcard Gym. He actually didn't pick anything up going into this fight. He was the same old Tony Ferguson. Maybe we'll see that. Maybe we won't. We'll see going into this one. But it does make me, and my guy Luke Lampy, I'm going to have him on later this week. I'll tease it again more in a second. My guy Luke Lampy, Sparring with Reality Betting, going to have him on episode 86, previewing UFC 262. But he tweeted it out. He was taping, I'm guessing he was taping, because that's what we do, and I'm taping all these fights right now too, of course, watching all these past fights with all these opponents. I'm guessing he was watching, again, that Tony Ferguson-Justin Gaethje fight from what took us out of the pandemic last May. And he tweeted it out, and it's famously, we've talked about on the show too, that I believe in between rounds 3 and 4, in the corner of Tony Ferguson, Eddie Bravo, his jiu-jitsu coach, goes up to him and just basically tells him, just go out there and M&I roll him. That's all he says, go out there and M&I roll him. That's all Eddie Bravo tells Tony Ferguson. And there was it just seemed like there was a coaching issue in that fight. There was a mentality issue in that fight. There was a lot going on going in against Justin Gaethje. And then he goes out there against Charles Oliveira again, and he looks beat again. And then he says this, that I've only trained 5 hours of jiu-jitsu. Again, I know you're training for different opponents, but just be ready. You know what I mean? Like, Tony Ferguson, just go train. And maybe I'm off on this, and maybe a fighter could go tell me, hey, you know what? I would do the same thing depending on my opponent. And I know that's not, and I know a lot of guys will do that. Like, hey, if I'm facing a striker, I'm gonna go train more striking than I am jiu-jitsu. But don't you have to be ready to a certain extent here, though? I don't want to hear I don't want to hear after this next fight, hey, I only trained about 2 hours boxing. I was mostly training jiu-jitsu. Just go out there and train. Go out there and do it, Tony. I mean, that's what I want to see from him in this one. And I'm actually, some Tony Ferguson fans would think, well, you hate Tony Ferguson. I love Tony Ferguson. I just think, let's get past some of this, right? And checking my notes again, just get past this. I want to see the mentality. I want to see the coaching there. I want to see the changes from Tony Ferguson going into the Saturday's fight against Beneil Dariush. Otherwise, again, it could be a short or long night for Tony Ferguson, and we could be looking at the end of Tony Ferguson's career as a title challenger. We could be seeing that if he loses this fight, especially bad, against Beneil Dariush on Saturday. But those are my takeaways from UFC 262 Countdown. Go check it out. It's up on YouTube, free to everybody. It's been on some of the channels as well, I believe ESPN, all that stuff. So go check it out. A ton of good nuggets, and I'll tweet out some more of those later on tonight at Jeff_Brantley as we get closer to UFC 262. And I spent a long time on that one, so I'm just going to shorten my last three. Normally I do my parting shots, my 3 parting shots. I'm just going to sum these up a little bit and get out of here because I'm running out of time. I already went too much over on that one, but we'll just go with one parting shot here, and that's with UFC 262 as well. Just some of the other fights on this card that I'm really looking at. Ones that I think are going underneath the radar a little bit because it's easy to say. I mean, Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler for the lightweight title in the main event, fantastic. 5 rounds, chaos, maybe a finish. We'll see, and I'll get into more of that later this week. I think it's a perfect matchup between those guys. You got the wrestling of Michael Chandler mixed with that boxing he has. Then Charles Oliveira, of course, he showed off the wrestling against Ferguson, but he's got the jiu-jitsu that's fantastic. He's got that shoot box style that he's gotten better and better at over the years. Fantastic matchup there. Tony Ferguson, Beneil Dariush, even if Ferguson comes out and he fights like he did against Charles Oliveira or against Justin Gaethje, still going to be an entertaining fight. It might not go Tony's way, but it's still going to be an entertaining fight because that's how both of those guys fight. So those are awesome fights, of course. Now, we lost the Shabazian-Hermansson fight, which is a bummer, but there's so many other great fights on this card that are going to go underneath the radar. One of my personal favorites, and this isn't a shocker, this isn't breaking news, hey, I'm giving you a super hot take here, but Shane Burgos versus Edson Barboza on the main card. Again, knock on wood here. I'm going to knock on some more wood that this fight does not get canceled. Because this is going to be a super fun fight. These guys are going to stand in the middle of the octagon and they're going to trade with each other. Burgos is going to use that boxing. He's going to use that fun mentality that he has. And, of course, Edson Barboza, his great kicking game, the fantastic kicking game he has. That's going to be a super fun fight. Could be fight of the night. Could steal the show, to be honest with you. Both those guys could get the bonus of the night if they put on a show like I think they can, or however long that fight's going to go, especially the first round. And a little peek ahead, again, I'm not going to give too much away from my preview show later this week, my thoughts on that fight, previewing it. But first round especially, because Barboza can start to get tired. You get tired a little bit as the fight goes on. I mean, and not to say Burgos wouldn't get a little tired as well, especially with some of those body kicks being ripped on him by Barboza. But first round, both these guys fresh. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun first round, a fun fight between Shane Burgos and Edson Barboza. And then some of the, even down this card here, one that's kind of a sleeper, in my opinion, and that's the Jordan Wright and Jordan Pickett fight. The Jordan Wright-Jordan Pickett fight. That's going to be fun. Excuse me, not Jordan. Sorry, I got the wrong J's here. Jamie Pickett and Jordan Wright. Too many J's here. Jordan Wright and Jamie Pickett. Excited for this fight as well. I think that's a sleeper fight. You have two guys who are coming off of fights against two really top hot prospects, and now you have two guys again, two Dana White Contender Series guys going to face each other. Going to be a fun one, and that's on the undercard again. So I think that's going to be a good one. Andrea Lee taking on Antonina Shevchenko. That'll be a fun fight. So a ton of great fights on this card. I mean, I just can't. It's so stacked. I don't think too many will. Unless there's too much bad luck, we should get most of these, and it's going to be fantastic. I mean, even without Nate Diaz, Leon Edwards, as I was saying earlier, without the Shabazian Jack Hermansson fight, still going to be great. I mean, we still get Jacare Souza on this card against Muniz. It's going to be fun, and I'm going to love it, and I think it's going to pop with the fans. I think the fans are going to get back into this one, and something I hadn't, because I've been so busy the last couple weeks or so since UFC 261. Something I haven't had a ton of chance to talk about, and maybe I'll just get into that. Maybe I'll have my last parting shot here is this. I said I was only going to do one. Maybe I'll do two here just because I want to talk about this. But my last parting shot here is the crowd and the impact and the influence it's going to have on this fight. Because we saw 261. What happened? We saw a lot of finishes. We saw a lot of crazy things happening. And I think a lot of that, and again, maybe not a super hot take, is the crowd. That a lot of these guys have not fought in front of a crowd in over a year. Some of them haven't fought in a year or two, right? Depending on what their situation was, what country they're in, that type of thing. Some of these guys, maybe they've only fought once or twice, you know what I mean? They haven't fought as much as they would have normally fought, 3 or 4 times. So a lot of guys they're starting to get back to a normal schedule, and they're back in front of the fans now. You got, 17,000 people now we're going to have in Toyota Center on their feet, screaming, cheering all of these fighters on. So when you get a Barboza versus Burgos, or you're going to have Oliveira in there with Chandler, it tends to, you tend to get that Cody Garbrandt thing, and that's the best example it can always use. That Cody Garbrandt is for better and worse, a very big crowd audience fighter. Where Cody Garbrandt, when he's feeling it and the crowd's feeling it, he loves to, of course, just drop those hands and slug it out and, get a little too confident, try to just knock guys out, right? And then he's been knocked out himself. We saw without a crowd, he was a little more composed. So you're going to get some of that with some of these guys. And you're going to get guys that are maybe doing things they normally wouldn't do, right? To try to get that bonus, feeding off the crowd. It's only natural. I mean, it happens in the NFL. It happens in the NBA. It happens in baseball. You feed off the crowd a little bit. And we're going to see that again this week. And this will be the second or third time. I mean, I know we had technically the Abu Dhabi. We had the Fight Island pay-per-view to start the year in January with some partial fans there. But then, the last card was the only one we really saw with full fans, and this would be the second one. So only second time this year now we're going to have full fans in the building. It's going to be fantastic. I'm going to be one of them. I'm going to be screaming my head off for every single fight, as it's going to be amazing, and I can't wait to bring you all of that coverage this week right here on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. And that's where I'm going to leave it for everybody, that it's going to be a busy week. I already tweeted it out earlier. I have a lot of coverage for you up on Twitter, Instagram, so follow me at Jeff_Brantley on both of those. Going to have a bunch of content tweets talking about all of these fights I'm taping, previewing it, get set for that episode 86 coming out later this week. And then I will have that episode 86 for you, where I'm going to preview top to bottom UFC 262. Some of these cards I've been kind of brushing over a little bit the last few weeks here, as again, I've been busy. This one, though, I'm going to go top to bottom, every single fight. I'm pumped for it. I'm going to have Luke Lampy on, as I just mentioned a little bit, from Sparring with Reality Betting. We'll talk about the betting side of things. We'll talk about all of that as we go into a massive card. Going to be fun. And then I'm also hinted at a little bit, maybe an episode 87 later this week. I'm looking at doing on Friday, along with releasing episode 86, I'm also looking maybe to do a little bit of a live show during the UFC weigh-ins. I'm not going to do it during the whole, I'm not going to do an Ariel Helwani. I'm not going to steal all their thunder. I'm not going to steal a lot of these shows will go on for the full weigh-in. I don't know if I'm going to do that, just because it is a long time with the weigh-ins, especially when you're only talking by yourself. Unless I can get maybe I can get somebody on with me. Well, let me see if I can work on that. Getting somebody on with me for that live show episode 87 during the weigh-ins. But just want to get on the tail end of the weigh-ins there, talk about what we've seen, see who looks good on the scales, who doesn't, if we have some issues with any of these fighters. And it's bound to happen. Hopefully, again, knock on wood, it doesn't. But, we've seen from card to card, it happens sometimes. So I'm going to look to do that later this week, too. So a bunch there. And then, again, I'm going to be in the building Saturday night for UFC 262. So literally the whole day. I'm going to get down. This is how pumped I am. I'm going to get down to Houston, Texas. I live about 30 minutes away or so from the city. I'm going to get down there early. I'm going to park it. I'm going to watch all the fans coming in. I'm going to sense, the environment. I'm going to pull it in myself again, because this is the first live fight I've been to in over a year. And first live sporting event. I haven't, as I don't have to tell you that. You haven't been either, right? I mean, that's most people, unless you went to the Florida Card or you've been to a baseball game yet, which some people have. But I haven't had a chance to do that yet. So I haven't been to any sporting events. I haven't been to any live fights in over a year. So I'm so pumped for it. I'm going to get down there, give everybody a sense of the environment of the fans, what's going on, the atmosphere of everything. And then when those doors first open, I'm going to be one of the first people in the doors. I'm going to go in there, listen to my guy DJ AML3, the official DJ of the UFC. I'm going to listen to him. It's going to be fun, but I'm going to give you all that kind of access, inside access, if you will, unless you're going to the fights. Then if you were going to the fights, let's go have a beer together, right? Let's go pop a cold beer somewhere on the concourse at the Toyota Center. But if you're not going to give a little bit of that inside access to all of the, what the atmosphere is like, all of that stuff, maybe some live in-arena updates here and there if you can hear me with all the fans in between fights. So I'm going to look to do that on Saturday right here on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. So go check it out. Go follow me on the YouTube page. Go subscribe to it. Again, it's the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. That's probably where I'm going to do my live show as well later this week. So go subscribe to that. You're going to get this episode, next episode, all of them. You'll be one of the first people to get the notification whenever that new video drops. And then if you're still more to the the audio of everything, go check me out on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, guys. You can listen to the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast, and then go check out the website, maninthecagemmma.show. All right, everybody, hope you're having a great Tuesday here. I recorded this actually on Monday. Don't know if I'm going to get it out till late tonight or early tomorrow. Hopefully no other breaking news happens in between then and there, but hopefully you're having a great start to your week, and I'll talk to everybody coming up later this week on episode 86 of the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. But until then, I'll talk to everybody later.